Howdy, I'm controversial cowboy Rex Hooper, and I'm asking you, does this offend you? The 1967 spaghetti western Navajo Joe was directed by Sergio Corbucci and stars Burt Reynolds. Now, it can be a rather uncomfortable watch at times, watching it in the modern age. Why? Well, because of the casting of Burt Reynolds as a full-blooded Navajo Indian. Feels a little odd, given our modern appreciation of progressive, inclusive casting in movies. I'm gonna go right out and say it. It looks a little like a red face. But does this mean that the movie needs to be cancelled, forgotten about in history, gotten rid of, a relic of less tolerant time? Well, I hope not, because there's still an awful lot to enjoy about Navajo Joe. To me, it's still a good movie, even though it's uncomfortable casting.
They won't come. Your man took the wrong way.
What do you mean?
You'll see. I know that I'm the man you need.
Navajo Joe tells the story of a single survivor of a Navajo tribe whose whole family, including his wife, had been massacred by scalp hunters. These scalp hunters were a real thing in American history. The government would pay for the scalps of Native Americans. Braves got more money than women and children, but all were accepted. This film, in part at least, is based on the truth.
This truck's running off the road, tampered with the brakes. When it comes to money, do what it takes.
Navajo Joe was filmed entirely in the south of Spain, like a lot of the spaghetti westerns. And it was directed by the second greatest spaghetti western director, Sergio Corbucci. Corbucci was a political filmmaker, and he infused a social message into all his films, including Navajo Joe.
Indian sheriff? The only ones elected in this country are Americans.
My father was born here, in the mountains. His father before him, and his father before him, and his father before him. Where was your father born?
What has that to do with it?
I said, where was he born?
In Scotland.
As far as I know, it's one of the only westerns to ever have a Native American as the main protagonist.
What's your name?
Joe.
I've never known an Indian named Joe. And I've never seen a Navajo so far south before.
And me, an Indian girl that asked so many questions.
How'd you reckon he ended up getting a name like Joe? How was it that this Navajo had the name of some paleface? Well, I reckon he probably took the name from some white man right before he killed him. As a final humiliation, taking away everything he got in the world, he took his name too. But that's just my theory.
Apparently, Sergio Corbucci initially wanted Marlon Brando to play the role. He'd just had a massive success with the film Django, and was given a bigger budget than usual. So he wanted Marlon Brando to play the lead of Navajo Joe. But he was convinced of a newcomer, a former stuntman by the name of Burt Reynolds. And in Burt Reynolds, you have pretty much everything you want from a leading man. He's handsome, he's charismatic, he's funny, he's tough.
My two personal favorites are the Hellbenders and Navajo Joe. His physical performance is astonishing in that movie. It's one of the great action physical performances. You know, one of the things that's fantastic about his performance in Navajo Joe, it's such an athletic performance. Joe has a fighting style that is recognizable when you watch the film as he attacks Duncan's men.
One of the ways in which Navajo Joe excels as a movie is its action. This thing is non-stop. Action after action. One of the things Corbucci as a director did really well was his big action set pieces. One of the things he was striving for was to make it the most violent film possible.
Navajo Joe was the most violent movie ever released by a studio to American screens until The Wild Bunch.
He and the producers had a theory that a film was based, or the success of a film was based more on the violence and the death that it included than in plotting or anything else. I don't know how much I buy into that, but certainly his quest for blood and gore makes for entertaining watch. You would have thought that Burt Reynolds would be a great choice for the film. He makes a great leading man. Handsome, charismatic, funny. And he seems like a nice guy as well, you know. He fell in love, apparently, with his horse during the filming of this movie. He rides a beautiful gypsy cob. Goes by the name of Destefanato. Destefanato, apparently, Burt Reynolds was so in love with this horse by the end of the movie, he gave his entire paycheck to Destefanato's owner so that the horse could be better taken care of. So is it okay for Burt Reynolds to play a full-blooded Native American? Where it gets difficult is that, well, he's an actor. That's what actors do. They pretend to be someone that they're not. You can't actually become someone else. You just have to pretend. That's what acting is. But is it all right to pretend to be of a race or nationality which you don't belong? Where it gets all the more complicated than that is that Burt Reynolds is Native American descent. He's not a Navajo, he's Cherokee. And maybe even suggesting that is offensive. Saying as though all Native Americans are the same, even though the different cultures and customs of different tribes would be vastly different from one another. So they're not the same. Would it have been better if they'd cast a full-blooded Cherokee to play Navajo Joe? Or would that be just as offensive? It might not look as uncomfortable to us modern eyes watching, but what does that mean? Is race more of a social construct than anything else? I don't know. These are questions. I don't have the answers. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Now, I'm no history buff, but I'm interested in history and I'd love to know more about it. It does seem to me, though, that the myth of the cowboys versus the Indians, the reality was more like Indians versus the government, because they systematically tried to wipe these people out. That makes it particularly hard, then, to try and cast correctly for a movie in 1967. The casting pool for full-blooded Navajo Native Americans wouldn't have been that available, especially not to Italian filmmakers. So the casting of Burt Reynolds, who had some Cherokee blood in him, well, maybe that counts for something. Maybe it's kind of offensive to try and say someone is not native enough.
For me, the greatest thing about Navajo Joe is the music. Composed by the maestro Ennio Morricone, the score for Navajo Joe is some of Morricone's greatest work. Influenced by the war cries, whoops, and rhythms of Native American music, this fits perfectly with the exciting, sometimes frightening, violence and action you see on screen. A beautiful soundtrack. But is there a problem with trying to copy the sounds of another culture? Ennio Morricone's Italian film composer trying to make music that sounds like Native American music. Is that what you might call cultural appropriation? Or is it just drawing influence from? Some might say there is no cultural appropriation, just culture. I certainly believe that the world is a better place because we have that score.
For me, the real difficulty with Navajo Joe is not necessarily the casting of Burt Reynolds, so much as the costuming of Burt Reynolds. I'm talking about that wig. That wig is awful. It really detracts from the entire movie. I feel like Navajo Joe never quite got the cult status of films like Django or Fistful of Dollars, not because it's a worse movie, but because of that wig. Burt Reynolds doesn't look cool. He looks a bit like Natalie Wood.
Burt Reynolds looks kind of foolish. Cinema is a cosmetic industry, and your protagonist, if you expect your film to be a hit, kind of needs to look good.
The coolness of your main character does count for something. And unfortunately, poor old Burt Reynolds, as cool as he is in other roles, doesn't quite have it, as long as he's wearing that wig.
One of the reasons why I recommend you give Navajo Joe a watch, and why it's still a great Western movie, is because in all its crudeness, it gives us an insight into a story less told. The history books can tell us what happened, but it's art that tells us how it felt. To completely reject art on account of its missteps and possible offending of sensitivities is a shame, considering that there was concerted effort to try and erase the Native Americans. Surely the worst crime of all would be to erase their story too.
Maybe it still ain't right that Burt Reynolds ain't a full Native American. It's not for me to say. What do you think? Strange thing is, though, is that the plot of the film, you have your main protagonist, who is a Native American, and he's pointing out social messages about what it means to be a Native American. It's telling a story of the real history of the scalp hunters that tried to wipe out the Native Americans. This film is socially conscious. It's just a shame that it doesn't look that way based on the casting. But sometimes you gotta believe the tale and not the teller. You gotta separate the art from the artist. Heck, most of the music I listen to was made by folks that shot someone else. I would say that a lot of contemporary Hollywood has the opposite issue. Their diverse casting is just used as a smokescreen against the imperialist, fascist messages of the movies. That's just me. What do you think? Can you separate the art from the artist? And is there any examples of culture and media that you refuse to give up, even though you know some of the dark truths about the people that created it? Let me know in the comments section below. I don't have the answers here, I'm just asking questions. But let me know your opinions. Let's get this community engaged. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you enjoy Western content. And if you want to further support this channel, I recommend you check out the Bandcamp, the Spotify for my record, Frontera USA, a collection of Western soundtracks. I'll see you later on, cowpokes, further on down the trail.